This is a heavy tale, friends. Pour yourselves a fresh horn of meat and throw another log on the hearth, for the story I'm about to tell you requires a warm room to stave off the chill it leaves in the bones. You see me now, a man of gray beard and steady hands, but there was a time when my hands shook with a tremor that no fire could settle. It wasn't the palsy of age or the fear of a living foe. It was the memory of the weight of my brother's wrist, cold as a river stone, as we wrestled in the mud of his own grave. This is the story of the night I fought my dead brother for his axe, viper tongue. And I tell it to you not to boast of my strength, but to warn you of the price of a legacy. To understand the night of the fight, you must understand Gunnar. He was my elder by 3 winters, and in those winters, he grew into a mountain of a man while I remained a sapling in his shadow. We were sons of a smith, born to the sound of the hammer on the anvil, but while I found peace in the intricate scrolling of jewelry, Gunnar found his soul in the heavy business of war. On his 18th name day, our father forged him viper tongue. It was a bearded axe, the head etched with runes of binding and the haft wrapped in the cured hide of a sea serpent. It was a beautiful, terrible thing. When Gunnar swung it, the air didn't just whistle, it screamed. Gunnar died as he lived at the front of the shield wall, protecting the retreat of men who didn't deserve his courage. He took a spear to the lung and a mace to the temple, but he didn't fall until he had cleaved the enemy's standard-bearer in 2. We buried him according to his wishes, in the high cairn overlooking the fjord, seated upright, with his silver rings on his arms and viper tongue gripped firmly in his hands. Let him keep his steel, the village elders said. He earned his rest. I was the one who piled the last stones. I was the one who whispered the final prayers to the All-Father. And for 3 moons, I was the one who sat by the fire, watching the shadows lengthen, knowing that our village was defenseless. A month after Gunnar's burial, the Skraelings or perhaps something worse, something ancient and hungry began to raid from the northern wastes. They weren't men who fought for gold or land, they fought for the sake of the harvest of souls. They moved in the mist, silent as owls, and their blades were coated in a poison that turned a man's blood to black sludge before he could even cry out. Our warriors were decimated. Our father, his spirit broken by Gunnar's death, could no longer hold the hammer. The steel he produced was brittle, snapping like dry twigs against the enchanted iron of the raiders. I watched as my neighbors were dragged into the dark. I watched the fear turn Skalavik from a proud village into a pen of panicked sheep. And every night, I looked up at the high cairn. I knew that the only weapon in 5 fjord lengths capable of biting through the raiders' armor was viper tongue. Our father had forged it with a secret fold in the steel, a drop of his own blood, and a prayer to the giants. The elders forbade it. To rob a mound is to invite the Draugr, they warned. To rob your own brother is to forfeit your soul. But as I watched my mother weep over a father who had forgotten how to speak, the fear of the Draugr paled in comparison to the fear of the silence that was coming for us all. I took my shovel, a skin of strong ale to steady my nerves, and I began the climb. The moon was a sliver of bone in a sky the color of a bruise. The wind up on the ridge didn't just blow, it pushed, as if the mountain itself was trying to shove me back down to the valley of the living. The cairn was a silent, gray sentinel. I began to pull the stones away. Each one felt heavier than the last, coated in a frost that burned my palms. Clack, 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 the sound echoed across the fjord, a rhythmic counting of my sins. I didn't think of Gunnar as a monster then. I thought of him as my brother. I remembered how he had taught me to fish, how he had carried me home when I broke my ankle in the scree. Surely, I told myself, he would want me to have the axe. Surely, he would want to save his people one last time. But as the last layer of stones fell away, and the cold, stagnant air of the tomb rushed out to meet me, my heart skipped a beat. There he was. He hadn't rotted. The mountain air and the ancient magic of the runes had preserved him. He sat on his stone bench, his skin the color of a winter twilight, his beard rimmed with frost. His eyes were closed, but his grip on that axe was as firm as the day we laid him there. Viper tongue sat across his knees, the silver inlay on the blade glowing with a faint, predatory light. "Forgive me, brother," I whispered, my breath a plume of white mist. I reached out. My fingers touched the cold wood of the haft. It felt vibrating, humming like a hive of angry bees. I pulled. The axe didn't move. I pulled harder, bracing my feet against the stone floor. Nothing. It was as if the axe was part of the mountain itself. I looked up at Gunnar's face, and my blood turned to slush. His eyes were open. They weren't eyes anymore. They were two pits of pale, swirling fog, devoid of the warmth and the laughter I remembered. His jaw creaked as it dropped open, releasing a sound that wasn't a voice, but the sound of grinding glaciers. Mine, the wind seemed to howl, though his lips did not move. His hand, that massive, scarred hand, moved with the speed of a striking snake. He didn't grab the axe, he grabbed my wrist. His skin was harder than iron and colder than the depths of the sea. I screamed, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror, and tried to wrench myself away. But the Draugr Gunnar was stronger in death than he had ever been in life. He rose from his seat, the stones of his tomb cracking under his weight, and pulled me toward him until we were chest to chest, the living and the dead, separated only by the cursed steel of Viper tongue. The fight was not a clash of warriors, it was a desperate, ugly struggle in the dirt. He didn't use the axe to strike me, not at first. He used it as a lever, pinning me against the wall of the cairn. Every time I tried to strike him, my fists felt like they were hitting solid oak. He moved with a jerky, unnatural rhythm, his joints popping like dry kindling. He threw me from the tomb, and we tumbled onto the snowy slope of the ridge, locked in a grim embrace. We rolled through the frost and the sharp rocks. I managed to get a hand on his throat, but he felt no need for air. He simply stared at me with those fog-filled eyes, and I saw the memories flickering within them, the times we had sparred, the times he had won. He was using the very moves he had taught me. He knew my reach, he knew my weaknesses, and he used his dead weight to crush the breath from my lungs. "Gunnar, stop," I choked out, my ribs groaning under his pressure. "The village, the raiders, mother needs you." At the mention of our mother, his grip faltered for a heartbeat. In that second, I reached for the axe. I managed to slip my hand into the space between his fingers and the haft. The moment I touched the steel, the world vanished. I wasn't on the ridge anymore. I was inside the axe. I felt the heat of the forge, the scream of the metal as it was quenched, and the thousand deaths it had dealt. But more than that, I felt Gunnar's grief. He wasn't holding onto the axe because he was greedy, he was holding onto it because it was the only thing left of his soul. To give it up was to truly die, to vanish into the gray nothingness of the afterlife. The Draugr Gunnar let out a roar, a sound of such profound loneliness that it shook the stars. He swung his fist, catching me in the temple, and the world spun into darkness. When I came to, he was standing over me, the axe raised high. The runes on the blade were no longer glowing, they were bleeding a dark, oily light. He was going to kill me. He was going to take me back into the mound with him, so he wouldn't have to be alone in the dark. I looked up at him, not with fear, but with a sudden, sharp clarity. "You were the shield, Gunnar," I said, my voice steady despite the blood in my mouth. "You died so we could live. If you kill me now for a piece of cold iron, then the spear in your lung was for nothing. You'll be the one who finished what the raiders started." The axe trembled. The blade was inches from my skull. I could smell the ancient dust and the scent of the sea serpent hide. His form seemed to flicker. The fog in his eyes cleared for a fleeting moment, and I saw a glimpse of the brother I loved, the boy who used to share his bread with me, when I was hungry. He didn't speak, but the pressure in the air changed. He took my hand, the hand he had nearly crushed, and placed it firmly around the center of the haft. Then, he placed his own hand over mine, one last time. It wasn't a fight anymore. It was a transfer. The cold didn't leave the axe, but the malice did. The weight became manageable. He leaned forward, his forehead touching mine, and I felt a phantom warmth, like the last embers of a dying fire. And then, he simply let go. I didn't watch him return to the mound. I couldn't. I gathered Viper tongue, my body a map of bruises and broken skin, and I stumbled down the mountain. I reached the village just as the mist was rolling in, and with it, the raiders. They came expecting sheep, they found a wolf armed with the bite of a dead king. I don't remember much of the battle. They say I fought like a man possessed, that the axe moved as if it had a will of its own, seeking out the gaps in the enchanted armor, guided by a hand that wasn't entirely mine. I remember the sound of the black iron snapping. I remember the way the raiders' eyes widened when they saw the runes on the blade. They knew the legend of Gunnar, and they thought he had risen from the grave to hunt them. When the sun finally broke over the fjord, the raiders were gone, those who could still run. The rest lay in the mud, their spirits sent to whatever dark place they called home. The village cheered. They called me a hero. They called me the new king of the fjord. But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a thief. I kept the axe, of course. I had to. It was the only thing that kept the peace in the years that followed. But I never used it for sport, and I never let another soul touch it. Every winter solstice, I return to the ridge. I don't dig up the stones anymore. I just sit by the cairn and talk to the silence. I tell Gunnar about the harvest, about how our mother finally found peace, and about the new smithy I built in his honor. But here is the truth of it, the part one don't tell the poets. The hand I used to fight my brother that night, the one he gripped so tightly, has never truly warmed up. Even now, sitting before this fire with all of you, it feels like it's dipped in ice water. And sometimes, in the dead of night, when the wind howls through the eaves, the axe on the wall begins to hum. It's not a threat. It's a reminder. We think we own our tools, our weapons, our legacies. We think we can reach into the past and take what we need without consequence. But blood is a circle, and the dead do not give up their burdens easily. I fought my brother for his axe, and I won the battle. But in doing so, I became the keeper of his ghost. I am the man who lives between the living and the dead, held together by a haft of sea serpent hide and a blade of frozen stars.